You saw the title of this. For statements like this one, my friends tell me I'm a pessimist. And I just figured out why it seems like that to them. It's because the upward trajectory of their lives intersected with the plateau of mine when we met. So for them, life is upward and optimistic. For me, life never really went up that high, that steep, or that much at all, to be honest, at least in terms of dollars and cents. That said, I don't think that I'm a pessimist. There are good things that I hope will happen, and I strive for them. But at the same time, I have a plan B and C, and an overall thought process that I should prepare for the worst case scenario in most situations. I've also learned that life and circumstances don't just change course on a dime like some UFO. Unusual things like humanity suddenly getting serious about climate change can happen, yes, but not to the degree where you begin to question whether you're awake or not, and that's what would have to happen for us to be effective. But life is not a dream, or a UFO for that matter. We humans are addicted to fossil fuels, and why wouldn't we be? They keep us warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Indirectly, they can take us around the entire world several times in a day, in the case of astronauts, millions of miles out of the solar system like the Voyager probes, or almost 7 miles deep in the ocean. Fossil fuels are what has made modern life amazing, bountiful, and safe. After bumbling around for hundreds of thousands of years, they have almost made us gods. Almost. Or maybe we are gods, and maybe this is our Ragnarok. Our fate, if we continue to use fossil fuels, is 100-year weather events will become yearly events. Some people's homes will be permanently flooded, and other people will be dying of thirst and hunger, and the oceans will become wet deserts devoid of life. And beyond that, we could trigger even worse events that could completely wipe us out. Unfortunately, while I've left some room for error in the way that I've said all this, it's almost inevitable for the reasons I'm going to mention. Number 5. Oil companies won't allow it. If we're being realistic, money runs the world, and the richest companies in the world are oil companies. If you think getting car manufacturers to put seatbelts and airbags in cars was hard, or destroying cancer-causing companies is difficult, you haven't seen anything yet. Oil companies think they have everything to lose. Oil rigs, tankers, gas pipelines, refineries, gas stations, billions and billions of consumers dropping money in their pockets every day. No, none of that is going away, as Justin Trudeau, Canada's pretty boy Prime Minister, said. No country would find 173 billion barrels of oil in the ground and leave them there. Formerly squeaky clean Canada definitely won't. The oil companies won't. And we will smoke that last barrel of oil right from our tracheotomy hole. Number 4. Some of the technology we need is not yet invented. If we were to even have the motivation to get off fossil fuels right this moment, we would need technology that people aren't putting enough effort into finding. For example, sometimes the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, and you don't have a nuclear power plant. That being the case, we need to store energy. But the amount of energy that we need to store, if we're going to maintain our standard of living, is enormous. And aside from theories and prototypes, no one has ever demonstrated a viable solution that most countries can use. And we aren't going to. Not in a reasonable amount of time anyway. For a moment there, I forgot the title of this piece, and I was going to go into all our different potential ways forward. I started remembering all the interesting articles and stories that we've all seen, but then, aside from the title, I remembered why most of these things, or none of them actually, are going to pan out. There are 2 things that really motivate us: fear and money. Fear is why there's an Ebola vaccine already, and why HIV treatment lagged for so long. Money is why there's an opioid crisis, even though we knew they were addictive. Fear is why the USA went to the moon lickety-split after the USSR sent a man into space. Money is why developers keep building houses in wetlands and other areas destined for disaster. For all our climate this and that, climate change does not evoke the manic hysteria of Ebola or of the Russians taking over space. Also, solving how to store massive amounts of energy safely is not going to produce the next tech billionaire, especially when we already have a way to store massive amounts of energy safely, i.e. fossil fuels, and we can get away with using them for one more year, right? As in, a kid who keeps asking their parent for one more story. Unfortunately, we have no parent to tell us no more, and morning is coming. Number 3. People hate nuclear power. Nuclear power could probably get the countries that have it most of the way off of fossil fuels. And for some countries, there's actually currently no viable green alternatives. At higher latitudes like the UK, northern USA and Canada, solar power is not enough to carry them through the winter without blackouts ranging from a few days to a few weeks. Not even with mountains and mountains of batteries using current technologies. Wind would help, but that's all it would do, help. There would still be blackouts. But between Chernobyl and Fukushima, theists and atheists, Palestinians and Israelis, vaxxers and anti-vaxxers agree that nobody likes nuclear power. In fact, we fear it, and that fear is enough to prevent nuclear power from coming to save the day. You're better off trying to convince anti-vaxxers or conspiracy theorists to see the light than to get a single nuclear power plant built anywhere in the world. Did I mention that the Chernobyl show recently was a mass of lies? Well, it was. Number 2 is we, the consumers, are addicted. Using fossil fuels has been good to us. Very good, like I said at the beginning. It takes less than a minute to refuel our cars and then drive for hours. Energy prices overall are cheap because we don't add in the environmental externalities. If we don't get off fossil fuels, we don't have to pay the extra taxes that are unavoidable in the transition. We won't have to deal with the hassle and upheaval of changing jobs and the education system supporting the fossil fuel sector to the green sector. Everything can just stay the same. Of course, we'll still have to pay the piper in the end, and that's pretty much what's going to happen. I quit smoking maybe 6 years ago, after smoking for the previous 19 years, and I can tell you that it was incredibly difficult. Even as I tried the last time, I could not imagine a life where I did not want to smoke. Now imagine all of the people, or even most of the people, in most of the 200 countries in the world trying to kick the fossil fuel habit that affects every aspect of their lives in a reasonable time frame. And the number one reason why we've already lost the climate change battle is it's very, very expensive. Recently, I had been vigorously debating with a friend of mine about the future of green energy generation and climate change. But it was only when we started to crunch the numbers that I finally realized that it was highly unlikely we were going to be up to the task of changing our fate. The real dollar cost of wind, solar, or otherwise energy generation systems, the necessary redundancies for when there are clouds or no wind, the distribution infrastructure to move the power around, and the price of the energy storage systems, whatever they might be, are simply enormous. They run into the tens of trillions of dollars for the entire world, and even for some countries at our current energy usages, far more for our future energy appetite. The task of not only going to zero carbon footprint, but actually a negative carbon footprint to deal with what is already in the atmosphere isn't impossible theoretically, but it might as well be. Just the energy storage alone for the UK, for example, is on the order of trillions of dollars. Here's the calculation. Elon Musk's energy storage facility in Australia costs $90 million and can store energy for 50,000 homes for 3 to 4 hours. So that's $1,800 a home multiplied by $27.6 million households in the UK equals 50 billion. If we multiply by 8 so that we have a system for 24 hours, that comes up to 300 billion, which is about $14,400 a home, which is close to the price of 2 of Tesla's residential Powerwall units that store enough solar energy for the average home for a day. Now, the UK can easily go without enough sunlight to generate substantial solar power during winter for 2 weeks or more. So if we multiply 14 by 300 billion, we get 4.2 trillion, or $201,600 per home. And that is just for the electricity storage for households. For comparison, the UK's GDP for 2017 was 2.62 trillion. We haven't touched the costs of the minimum number of solar farms we need, or the redundancies for when the sun doesn't shine in one area, or for the wind farms to back up the solar, or for the wiring infrastructure to connect all the parts. By the way, the price for the minimum number of solar panels needed to power the UK is close to $1 trillion. We also haven't talked about the energy we need to generate and store for planes, trains, and automobiles, or for anything outside of residential usages like manufacturing or the military. To be honest, even populating the earth with nuclear power plants is also in the tens of trillions of dollars. We would need so many plants that there would potentially be a few accidents a year at the very least. And even then, that path is full of things that we haven't yet invented, like new designs so we don't run out of fuel. Once you start listing and adding up all the things we need and the associated price tag, something begins to emerge. What begins to emerge is that there is no way our governments, certainly the US government and the European governments, could not have realized a long time ago that barring revolutionary changes in our lifestyle, we are not going to ever be able to stop the globe from warming up indefinitely. And barring some way to generate the necessary fear or profit to be gained from fighting climate change, there will never be the necessary motivation and political will to make serious attempts. So that is probably a small part of the reason they have never taken it seriously. We don't need to make up or jump the gun on threats like AI enslaving or destroying mankind. Climate change is our existential threat. Right now, for all intents and purposes, it is that hurtling, inevitable, extinction-level asteroid that world governments detected a few decades ago, and realizing that they could do nothing to stop it, have decided not to bother to tell us about. Hi, this is Earthling. Please give a like if you like, a dislike if you don't, and feel free to subscribe because I need some subscribers. So, thank you. Bye.